Hello everyone. Today we're going to do something a little bit different and take a look at the original Amiga 1000 user guide. I've never read this before and I thought it would be kind of fun if we could read through it together. So I will be reading you the original Amiga user guide. Came in this really sturdy binder here. The binder has aged a little bit, but the pages inside still look pretty sharp. So introduction to Amiga. We have our table of contents here. Copyright 1985, Commodore Amiga, Inc. Chapter 1, Introducing the Amiga. Welcome. You're about to meet an extraordinary personal computer. It's powerful, yet it's easy to learn and use. It's agile. It can work at several tasks all at the same time. It's colorful and musical. In this manual, you'll meet the Amiga and learn how you can use it both at work and at play. Chapter 2, Setting up the Amiga. Your Amiga takes only a few minutes to put together. Here are the things you'll find packaged with the Amiga: the main unit, the AC power cord, the keyboard cable, the mouse, 3 micro discs, manuals, including the one you're reading now, and warranty information. Where to find connectors. And on this page we have pictures of the Amiga body itself. On the back of the main unit, you'll find a number of connectors. These are places where you attach cables and other devices. On the right side of the main unit, you'll find 2 more connectors labeled 1 and 2. Before you start, before putting your Amiga together, be sure to read each instruction carefully. While it's not difficult to assemble the Amiga, it is possible to damage it if you don't follow the instructions. When you attach any of the cables or insert anything into a connector, remember, use a minimum of force. You can tell when a cable and connector are properly mated when the end of the cable first slides into the connector, then stops when it's in as far as it will go. Always start by pushing gently on the end of a cable. If the cable doesn't slide inward, check the cable and connector to make sure they match and they're properly oriented before applying more force. Attaching the keyboard. Find the keyboard cable, the coiled cable that's straight at one end. Plug the straight end into the keyboard connector on the back of the Amiga. Now put the rest of the keyboard cable underneath the main unit. There's a square opening for the cable to pass through. Finally, plug the other end of the keyboard cable into the keyboard. You can change the tilt of the keyboard by folding down the 2 legs on the bottom. Try both positions to find the tilt that's most comfortable. With the legs folded up, you can slide the keyboard under the main unit. This helps save space on your work surface when you're not using the Amiga. Attaching the mouse. Before attaching a new mouse, turn the mouse upside down and pull out the piece of foam that holds the mouse ball in place. If you don't get all the foam out, see the Cleaning the Mouse section in Chapter 6 to find out how to uncover the mouse ball. To attach the mouse, just plug the end of the mouse's cable into the connector labeled 1 on the right side of the main unit. It's a tight fit. This helps keep the plug in place. Be sure to press firmly. If you're right-handed, you'll want the mouse to the right of the keyboard. If you're left-handed, put the mouse to the left. Make sure that the place you set aside from the mouse is at least 12 inches by 12 inches and that it's clean and flat. Attaching the video monitor. The video monitor displays visual information. There are 3 kinds of video monitors you can use with the Amiga. An RGB monitor. The Amiga monitor available from Amiga dealers is an RGB monitor. RGB monitors normally produce the best quality display. An NTSC composite video monitor. There are many kinds of NTSC monitors made specifically for computers. In addition, many newer televisions have NTSC connectors that allow you to connect them directly to computers. A television. Conventional televisions, those without NTSC connectors, can also be used as monitors for the Amiga. When choosing a monitor, note that televisions and NTSC monitors cannot display as much information as RGB monitors. RGB monitors can show 80 characters clearly on each side of the display, while most televisions and NTSC monitors can show only 60 characters clearly. Attaching an RGB monitor. To attach an Amiga monitor, use the video cable supplied with the monitor. Plug the small end of the video cable into the connector on the back of the monitor. Plug the large end of the cable into the RGB connector on the back of the Amiga. To attach other RGB monitors, see your Amiga dealer for the correct cable and instructions. Attaching an NTSC monitor. To attach an NTSC monitor or a television with an NTSC connector to the Amiga, use a shielded cable with a phono plug at each end. You can get this cable from your Amiga dealer. Plug one end of the cable into the appropriate connector on the monitor, then plug the other end into the NTSC connector on the back of the Amiga. Attaching a television. To use a conventional television as a monitor, you need a TV modulator cable, and a TV switch box. You can get these from your Amiga dealer. You'll find instructions packaged with them. Connecting audio equipment. The Amiga produces high-quality stereo sound. There are two connectors on the back of the Amiga for connecting the Amiga to audio equipment. Unless you've attached a conventional television to the Amiga with a TV modulator, you'll need to connect the Amiga to either an audio system or the audio connector found on some monitors to hear sounds produced by the Amiga. Connecting the Amiga to a stereo system. To connect the Amiga to a stereo system, you need two cables. Each cable must on one end have a plug that fits the input connector on your amplifier or receiver. This is most often a phono plug. And on the other end, have a phono plug to fit into the Amiga. On most stereo systems, there are extra inputs, often labeled auxiliary or aux, to which you attach one end of each cable. On the back of the Amiga are two audio connectors, one for the left audio signal and one for the right audio signal. Insert the other end of each cable into the appropriate audio connector. Sound connectors for monitors. Some monitors, including the Amiga monitor, have a built-in speaker. To connect a monitor for sound, you need a Y adapter that converts two stereo channels from the Amiga to a single channel, and a cable for connecting the Y adapter to the audio connector on the monitor. You can get Y adapters and connecting cables from many stores that carry radio and electronic parts. To connect the monitor, insert the two phono plugs at the top of the Y into the audio connectors on the back of the Amiga. Next, insert one end of the connecting cable into the connector on the monitor. Finally, connect the other end of the cable to the Y adapter. Plugging it in. You're almost done putting your Amiga together. Before you plug it in and turn it on, make sure there's nothing covering the ventilation slots on the back or bottom of the main unit. Plug the 6-sided end of the power cord into the main unit. Plug the other end of the power cord into a grounded outlet, and you're ready to start using your Amiga. Chapter 3. Getting Started. In this chapter, you'll learn the basics of using your Amiga. When you're done, you can start using the tools, such as the GraphicCraft color graphics tool that lets you work with the Amiga. A note about the mouse. The descriptions in this chapter and throughout the rest of this manual assume you're using a mouse. There are, however, certain keys on the keyboard you can use in place of the mouse. To learn how, see the sections moving the pointer without a mouse, selecting without a mouse, and using menus without a mouse in this chapter. Using disks. Start by getting the 3 micro disks, the Kickstart disk, the Workbench disk, and the Extras disk that came with your Amiga. These disks contain important information used by the Amiga. In addition, have 3 blank microdisks ready. You can get blank microdisks from your Amiga dealer. You'll copy the information from the original disks onto these blank disks and keep the originals in a safe place. Your original Amiga disks may have protect tabs. These are small plastic tabs on the back of the disks. If you find protect tabs on the original disks, slide each tab toward the edge of the disk until it clicks into place. When you do, you'll be able to see through a small hole in each disk. By putting the protect tabs in this position, you'll prevent the information on the disks from being changed while they're in the Amiga. On each of the 3 blank disks, make sure that the Protect tab is toward the middle of the disk so that it covers the hole. With the tab in this position, you can add new information to a disk. The on-off switch is on the left side of the main unit. To turn on the Amiga, press the end of the switch labeled 1. A word of warning. Whenever you turn off the Amiga, always wait at least 5 seconds before turning it on again. If you don't observe this precaution, you may damage the Amiga. Next, turn on the monitor or television attached to your Amiga. In a few moments, you'll see a picture of a hand holding a Kickstart disk. This is your cue to insert the Kickstart disk, metal end in, label side up, into the disk drive, the device that reads information from disks and adds information to them. Push in the disk until it clicks into place. After you put in the disk, you'll hear sounds from the Amiga. These are the sounds the disk drive makes as it gathers information. In less than a minute, the Amiga will get the information it needs, with the help of the disk drive, from the Kickstart disk. Notice that while the disk drive is working, the disk drive light is on. A word of warning. Never remove a disk when the disk drive light is on. The disk drive light tells you that the Amiga is using the disk. Taking a disk out too soon may make it impossible for the Amiga to finish an important task, such as reading the information from the Kickstart disk. Even worse, taking a disk out too early may ruin the information on a disk. Always wait for the disk drive light to turn off before you remove a disk. When the Amiga is finished with the Kickstart disk, the disk drive light turns off and the hand reappears, this time holding the Workbench disk. Take out the Kickstart disk by pressing the button on the front of the disk drive, then insert the Workbench disk. In a few moments, you'll see the Workbench. At the top is a title bar that identifies the Workbench. On the Workbench is an icon, a small picture that represents the Workbench disk. You'll learn more about icons later in this chapter. Moving the pointer. You use the pointer, a small arrow on the display, to point out the things you want to work with. Moving the mouse moves the pointer. Without pressing either of the mouse buttons on top of the mouse, try rolling the mouse. Be sure to hold the mouse as shown below. To point, move the pointer so that its tip is over the thing you want to point to. When you first use the mouse, don't worry if it feels a bit clumsy. Once you're familiar with it, you'll find that using the mouse is very quick and convenient. If you run out of room for your mouse before you get the pointer where you want it, just lift the mouse and put it down where there's more room. Lifting the mouse doesn't move the pointer. Moving the pointer without a mouse. To move the pointer without a mouse, hold down either of the Amiga keys while you press a cursor key. With an Amiga key held down, the pointer moves in the direction of the arrow on top of the cursor key you press. The longer you hold down the keys, the faster the pointer moves. To make the pointer move even faster, hold down both the Shift key and Amiga key while you hold down a cursor key. To stop moving the pointer, release the cursor key. Selecting icons. You use the Selection button, the left button on the mouse, to select icons and other features. Try selecting the icon for the Workbench disk. Point to the Workbench disk icon, then click, press, and quickly release the Selection button. The icon for the Workbench disk is highlighted to indicate that it's selected. Selecting without a mouse. To select an icon without using a mouse, first point to the icon, then press both the left Amiga key and the left Alt key at the same time. Anything you do by pressing the Selection button on the mouse, you can also do by pressing the left Amiga key and the left Alt key at the same time. Using menus. For most tools, including the Workbench, there are menus that list choices you can make. To use menus, you use the Menu button, the right-hand button on the mouse. The best way to learn how menus work is to try one. Select the icon for the Workbench disk if it isn't already selected. Hold down the Menu button. When you do, the menu bar appears. In the menu bar, there are titles of menus. Without releasing the Menu button, point to the title Workbench in the menu bar. The Workbench menu appears. While keeping the Menu button down, point to Open the menu. Open is highlighted. Choose Open by releasing the Menu button while Open is highlighted. By choosing the Open item from the Workbench menu, you open a window for the Workbench disk. In the window, you see icons that represent the contents of the Workbench disk. If you decide you don't want to choose a menu item, move the pointer off the menu before releasing the Menu button. To browse through a tool's menus, just hold down the Menu button while moving the pointer along the menu bar. Without choosing an item, you'll get to look at the menu items that are available. Using menus without a mouse. Just as pressing the left Amiga key and the left Alt key at the same time is like pressing the Selection button, pressing the right Amiga key and the right Alt key at the same time is like pressing the Menu button. To use menus without a mouse, hold down the right Amiga key and the right Alt key while you move the pointer with the cursor keys. When the menu item you want is highlighted, release the right Amiga key and the right Alt key. Duplicating your disks. It's important to make duplicates of your original disks and keep the originals in a safe place. You then use the duplicates, called working disks, for everyday use. Before you do anything else with the Workbench, follow these directions for duplicating disks. Select the icon for the Workbench disk, then choose Duplicate from the Workbench menu. A requester appears. A requester is something the Amiga uses to communicate with you. Here, the requester tells you how many times you'll have to change disks as you copy. Select Continue to go on. A new requester asks you to put the disk you want to duplicate in drive 0. Drive 0 is the disk drive in the main unit. Drive 1 is an external disk drive. Since the Workbench disk is already in drive 0, select Continue to go on. Next, you'll see a requester that asks you to insert the disk to receive the copy. Take out the Workbench disk, insert one of the blank disks, then select Continue. Finally, there is a series of requesters that asks you to exchange disks. Insert the disk each requester asks for, then select Continue. When you've finished copying the disk, remove the copy and label it using one of the self-adhesive disk labels packaged with new disks. Copy the other two disks in the same way. Insert the disk you want to copy, select the icon for the disk, choose Duplicate from the Workbench menu, then follow the instructions in the requesters. Be sure to label the copies when you're finished. When you've made copies of all three disks, put the original disks in a safe place and use only the working disks. That way, if you lose or damage a working disk, you'll be able to make another copy from the original. To learn about proper care for your disks, see Chapter 6, Caring for the Amiga. Before going on, you need to insert the newly copied Workbench disk, then reset the Workbench. To reset, make sure the disk drive light is off. Hold down the Control key, the left Amiga key, and the right Amiga key at the same time for at least half a second, then release the keys. When you reset the Workbench, you clear the Amiga's memory, the electronic circuits the Amiga uses to store information, then the Workbench reappears. You're back to where you were when you first inserted the Workbench disk. 2 warnings. Never reset the Workbench when the disk drive light is on. Resetting when the light is on may damage the information on the disk. When you reset the Workbench, any work that has not been saved to the disk is lost. When you begin using the tools on the Amiga, remember to save your work before you reset. Using a tool, Preferences. With the Preferences tool, you can make a number of changes to your Amiga. In Chapter 7, you'll find a complete list of preferences settings. Here you'll learn how to start using preferences, how to use preferences to get the most from your monitor, and what to do when you're finished using preferences. Select the icon labeled Copy of Workbench, then choose Open from the Workbench menu. When the Preferences icon appears, select it, then choose Open from the Workbench menu. A window for Preferences appears. Tools use windows to display information and to accept information from you. The Preferences window shows you the current settings for preferences and lets you change them. At the left of the Preferences window, you set the number of characters, letters, numbers, and symbols that appear on each line of the display. To the right of the word text are 2 gadgets, one marked 60 and the other marked 80. If you're using an Amiga monitor or another RGB monitor, select 80. If you have an NTSC monitor or television attached to your Amiga, select 60. When you're done, select Save to save your choices on the Workbench disk and return to the Workbench. Creating a project. You'll use most Amiga tools to create projects. One example of a project is a note you write with a Notepad, a tool that is included on your Workbench disk. Here's how to write a note. Select the Utilities drawer on the Workbench, then choose Open from the Workbench menu. In the window that appears, you'll see the icon for the Notepad. Open the Notepad by selecting its icon, then choosing Open from the Workbench menu. You can also try another way to open a tool. Point to the icon for the tool, then double-click the selection button. To double-click, quickly press and release the selection button twice. In a few moments, a window for the Notepad appears. Using the keyboard, type in your note. To save your note, choose Save As from the Project menu. Because the Notepad window is selected, you'll see menus for the Notepad in place of the Workbench menus. Select the box that appears to the right of the word Name, type in a name for your note. The name can be up to 25 characters long. Press the Return key on the keyboard, then select the OK gadget. When you're done, choose Quit from the Project menu. The next time you open the Utilities drawer, you'll see a new icon. This is the icon for your note. If you want to get back to your note, open it by pointing to its icon and double-clicking the selection button. When you reopen your note, the Notepad is also reopened. You can then add or change the note. Now that you're acquainted with the Workbench, menus, and projects, you're ready to use other Amiga tools. Take time now to become familiar with one or more of the tools. When you're done, read Chapter 4 to learn the many other things you can do with the Workbench. And that's going to do it for our first installment of reading the Amiga 1000 User Guide. If you like this video and you want to see more, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and adios.